Hello and welcome to Digital Pulse. Today, we're diving deep into a story that'll have you questioning everything you thought you knew about online relationships. We're talking about the wild world of catfishing, but not just any story. This one's got more twists and turns than a season finale of your favorite thriller.
It really does feel like something straight out of a movie, doesn't it? The lengths people will go to for connection for whatever reason they're seeking it. It's fascinating and disturbing all at once.
It really is. And it's all laid out in the Sweet Bobby case, even turned into a Netflix documentary if you want to go even deeper down the rabbit hole after this. But for now, we'll unpack it all together. So imagine this. You meet someone online back in 2009, Bobby Jandu, a cardiologist who seems to share your cultural background and even seems to know some of your friends. He's charming, attentive, everything seems to click. This was Kiratasi's reality. And over time, what began as an online connection blossomed into what she believed was love.
And this is where the line between reality and fabrication gets incredibly blurry. Because Bobby, despite the instant connection, always had a reason why they couldn't meet face-to-face. A sudden illness, an accident, even claims of being placed under witness protection. The excuses became increasingly outlandish, but there was always someone there to back them up.
Wait, what? Someone backing them up?
Yeah.
Like other people vouching for his stories?
Exactly. Kirat was drawn into a web of what she believed were Bobby's friends and family members, all adding layers of validation to his elaborate tales. This network of fabricated relationships is one of the aspects that makes the Sweet Bobby case so unusual and frankly disturbing.
It's like something straight out of a psychological thriller. You think you're building a relationship with one person, but in reality, it's an intricate illusion carefully constructed over years. I can only imagine the emotional turmoil when the truth finally came out.
And the truth was even more shocking than anyone could have anticipated. After 9 years of this online relationship, Kirat discovered that Bobby Jandu was actually her female cousin Simran all along.
No way. Her own cousin. That adds a whole other layer of betrayal and psychological complexity to this story. Talk about a family reunion you never expect.
Right. And to this day, Simran has never fully explained her motivations, leaving Kirat and us grappling with a profound sense of betrayal and unanswered questions.
Wow. So where do we even begin to unpack the psychology of someone orchestrating such a long-con catfish scheme?
Yeah.
I mean, what needs might they be trying to fulfill through this kind of elaborate deception? It's mind-boggling.
It certainly is a question that has captivated researchers and psychologists for a long time, and unfortunately there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer. But by diving into the specifics of what you've shared, we can definitely shed some light on some of the potential psychological factors at play.
Yeah, okay, that's reassuring. So where do we begin? What are some of the threads we can start to pull on here?
Well, one starting point is understanding the cultural context. Kirat has spoken about the pressures and expectations within her Punjabi community, particularly surrounding relationships and communication. This context is crucial because it likely influenced how she perceived the situation and her willingness to come forward.
That's a really good point. We often underestimate the influence of cultural norms on our behaviors and decisions. It's like an invisible script we're all following. So, in Kirat's case, how do you think these cultural factors might have played a role?
Well, it's important to remember that every culture has certain expectations, especially when it comes to things like dating, marriage, and family honor. It sounds like for Kirat, those cultural values might have made her more hesitant to confide in others about what was happening.
That makes sense. If there's already this pressure to conform to certain ideals, admitting to something like being catfished, especially by someone claiming to be from the same background, it could feel incredibly isolating, like you failed somehow.
Exactly. And that feeling of shame or failure can be incredibly powerful, often preventing people from speaking out or seeking help, even when they desperately need it. So in a way, these cultural factors could have made Kirat more vulnerable to this kind of manipulation.
Wow, that's heartbreaking. It's like a vicious cycle. The cultural pressure creates silence, and that silence allows the abuse to continue unchecked. And on top of that, you have the universal experience of being deceived by someone you thought you knew. What are some of the long-term psychological impacts that victims of catfishing often face, regardless of their cultural background?
The emotional scars of this kind of betrayal can run incredibly deep. Imagine investing years of your life, your heart, into a relationship that was entirely fabricated. Many victims describe it as a profound sense of loss, not just for the relationship itself, but for the time, the emotional energy, the hopes and dreams they poured into something that was never real.
It's like grieving a phantom limb, something that never truly existed except in your mind and heart. And yet the pain is very, very real.
Precisely. And then there's the damage to your sense of trust, not just in future relationships, but in your own judgment. Victims often blame themselves, questioning why they didn't see the signs, why they allowed themselves to be fooled. It can lead to a spiral of self-doubt and insecurity that can be incredibly difficult to break free from.
So how do you even begin to recover from something like this? Where do you even start to rebuild your life and your sense of self after such a profound violation?
Well, first and foremost, it's crucial to remember that healing is possible. It takes time, it takes work, but it's definitely achievable. One of the most important steps is seeking professional help. A therapist who specializes in trauma and abuse can provide a safe space for victims to process their experiences, work through the emotional fallout, and develop coping mechanisms.
So having that objective, non-judgmental support system is key. Someone who can help you make sense of the chaos, untangle the emotional knots, and guide you toward a place of healing.
Exactly. And for many, connecting with others who've been through similar experiences can be incredibly powerful. Support groups, either online or in person, can foster a sense of community and understanding, reminding victims that they're not alone in their struggles.
There's something so validating about knowing that others truly understand what you're going through. It can be incredibly empowering, especially when you're feeling isolated and alone in your pain.
Absolutely. And beyond professional support and community, there's a lot to be said for the power of self-care. Engaging in activities that bring joy, prioritizing your physical health through things like exercise and nutrition, setting healthy boundaries in your relationships. These are all crucial steps in rebuilding your self-esteem and moving forward.
It's like hitting the reset button on your life.
Hmm.
Taking the time to reconnect with yourself, rediscover what brings you joy, and create a life that feels authentic and fulfilling on your terms.
Exactly. And in Kieran's case, it seems like choosing to share her story publicly on her own terms was a crucial part of reclaiming her narrative.
That's so true. By participating in the Netflix documentary, she took back control. Instead of being known as the victim, she became a survivor, using her voice to shed light on this complex issue and potentially protect others from experiencing similar trauma.
You got it.
Yeah.
And her courage in speaking out is even more impactful when we consider the potential legal complexities of cases like this.
That's a really important point, because while the emotional and psychological toll of catfishing is undeniable, navigating the legal system in these situations can feel like a whole other minefield. So let's talk about that. Where does the law currently stand on catfishing? Is it even illegal?
That's the tricky part. Catfishing in and of itself isn't always explicitly illegal, which can be incredibly frustrating for victims seeking justice. You see, existing laws tend to focus on specific harmful actions, such as identity theft, fraud, or harassment, rather than the act of deception itself.
So it's not about the lie. It's about proving that the lie resulted in tangible harm. That seems like an incredibly difficult distinction to make, especially when we're talking about emotional and psychological damage, which can be just as devastating as any financial loss, if not more so.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's a huge challenge. Proving intent to cause harm and demonstrating a clear link between the deception and the harm suffered can be incredibly difficult in these cases, especially when the perpetrator is skilled at covering their tracks.
Which it sounds like Simran was, at least to some extent. So even though Kirat ultimately received some compensation through a civil case, Simran hasn't faced any criminal charges for her actions.
You're right, and that outcome highlights a significant gap in our current legal framework. It's why many advocates are pushing for specific catfishing legislation, arguing that existing laws don't adequately address the unique psychological harm and emotional distress inflicted by this kind of calculated deception.
It makes sense that the law would need to catch up with the ever-evolving digital landscape. The internet has created new avenues for both connection and exploitation, and recognizing the very real damage that emotional abuse and manipulation can inflict is critical in ensuring justice for victims.
Absolutely. And while there have been some positive strides in recent years, with some states enacting specific catfishing laws, we still have a long way to go in creating a comprehensive legal framework that truly protects victims and holds perpetrators accountable in the digital age.
It's a good reminder that the fight for digital justice is ongoing, and that cases like Sweet Bobby are essential in raising awareness and pushing for those much-needed legal reforms. But in the meantime, until those legal protections catch up with the realities of our digital lives, what are some practical steps people can take to protect themselves from becoming a victim of catfishing?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that, because knowledge really is power in these situations. The more you understand the tactics catfishers use, the better equipped you'll be to spot the red flags early on.
So what are some of those red flags? What should people be looking out for when they're engaging in online relationships?
Well, one of the most common tactics is using stolen photos, so don't be afraid to do a little detective work. You can use reverse image search engines to see if their photos are popping up elsewhere online.
Well, that's a great tip. May have to remember that one. And I imagine those elaborate backstories that catfishers often create are another big giveaway.
Absolutely. Pay attention to inconsistencies in their stories and be wary if they're constantly dodging questions or changing the subject when you get too close to certain topics. Also, be cautious about sharing too much personal information too quickly. You never truly know who's on the other end of that screen.
That's good advice for both online and offline interactions, really. Trust your gut. If something feels off, if something seems too good to be true, or if they're consistently avoiding meeting up in person, those are all major red flags waving right in your face.
You got it. And don't ever feel pressured to engage with anyone online who makes you uncomfortable. Blocking and reporting suspicious profiles are always options, and you might even help protect others from falling victim to the same scam.
It's like they say, if you see something, say something. We all have a responsibility to create a safer online environment. But what if, despite all our best efforts, we still find ourselves caught in a catfishing situation? What advice would you give to someone who's just realized they've been deceived?
First and foremost, remember you are not alone. It's easy to fall into self-blame, but it's crucial to understand that you were deliberately manipulated. Reach out to someone you trust, a friend, family member, therapist, anyone you feel safe confiding in. Talking about your experience can be a huge step in processing what happened and starting to heal.
It's so important to have that support system, that reminder that you're not defined by what happened to you. And I imagine professional guidance from a therapist or a support group specializing in online deception could be incredibly valuable in these situations.
Absolutely. They can provide coping strategies, help you process the emotional fallout, and guide you toward a place of forgiveness, both for yourself and for the person who hurt you. Because ultimately, healing from something like this is a journey, not a destination.
That's so true. It's about taking things one day at a time, being kind to yourself, and remembering that you are worthy of love and connection even after experiencing betrayal. And, when I think about Kirat choosing to share her story so publicly, it strikes me as such a powerful act of reclaiming her narrative. It's like she's taking back the power from the person who tried to control and define her.
Right. It's a powerful reminder that even in the face of such a deeply personal and painful experience, we always have a choice. We can choose to retreat into silence and shame, or we can choose to use our voices, share our stories, and connect with others who understand.
And in doing so, we not only help ourselves heal, but we also contribute to a larger conversation, chipping away at the stigma and shame that often surround these kinds of experiences. It's about turning pain into purpose, and that's a truly beautiful and inspiring thing.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, if this deep dive has piqued your interest and you find yourself wanting to learn more, we highly recommend checking out the sweet Bobby materials you shared, especially the Netflix documentary. It's a captivating and at times unbelievable story, but it's also a powerful reminder of the complexities of online relationships, the importance of digital literacy, and the very human need for connection, even when it comes at a cost.
It's definitely a story that will stay with you. And hopefully it will encourage everyone listening to approach their own online interactions with a little more awareness, a little more caution, and a lot more self-love.
Well said.
Yeah.
Till next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, especially in the wild world of the internet.